I've been a truck driver for a long time. That night, I pulled over on an off-ramp around 3 in the morning. It was the start of my mandatory rest break. The full moon was high, casting a pale light across the landscape. I could see everything around me clearly. That's when I noticed a figure standing right in the middle of a cut in the cornfield just a few yards from where I was parked. It looked human, but something about how still it was made me decide against getting closer. I figured it might just be a scarecrow, maybe set up by a grandpa to amuse his grandkids. I shrugged it off, closed the curtains, and started watching videos on my phone, trying to unwind. A few minutes later, something caught my eye in my peripheral vision. I turned off the truck's lights and looked straight at the field. The figure was still there, but it seemed closer. I couldn't say for sure if it had moved, but that's how it felt. A strange unease crept in. The highway was dead silent. No passing cars, just the wind and the soft ticking of a cooling engine. Still, I tried to stay calm. I locked everything up and stayed inside the cab, acting like nothing was out of the ordinary. Soon enough, I had to pee. I really didn't want to use a bottle, so I decided to step out. As I climbed down from the truck, I glanced at the field again. The figure was exactly where I remembered it. No sound, no movement. I walked over to the passenger side, between the trailer and the cab, trying to focus only on what I needed to do. Still, that fear kept digging deeper. I couldn't stop myself from looking again. And that's when the panic hit. The figure was gone, just gone. The whole field, flat and open, was empty. I looked in every direction. No shadows, no movement. My body went cold. I finished as quickly as I could and sprinted back to the truck, slammed the door shut, hands shaking, fired up the engine, and got out of there without a second thought. Broke every rule, skipped the rest break. I just needed distance. I drove for nearly an hour until I found a well-lit truck stop with other rigs parked nearby. Since then, I've never slept on exit ramps again. I don't know if what I saw was real or just exhaustion playing tricks on me, but I'm no longer interested in finding out what hides in the silence of the road at night. Sometimes it's better not to know what's lurking in the dark. Life on the road has taken me through countless highways. I've crossed a good portion of the United States, collecting incredible memories full of laughter, strange detours, and surprises. But it wasn't all smooth. Back then, the road was a different place. We didn't have all the tech that trucks have today. Our distractions were a short stack of worn-out DVDs, a battered book on the dash, or long conversations over the CB radio with fellow drivers. That's how we came to know a trucker who occasionally shared our route on the radio. He went by the name Maniac. Whenever our paths crossed, we'd exchange a few words. We used to hear weird stories over the radio, tales of killings at truck stops right along the same interstates we ran every week. Nobody could say for sure if they were real or just made up to pass time. When we brought it up to Maniac, he laughed, said if any of that were true, the guy behind it would have been caught already. But then he added, with how messy those scenes are, maybe he wants to be found. That hit differently, unsettling. But coming from him, it wasn't entirely unexpected. Maniac was off, hard to pin down, and that made him even more difficult to understand. One hot night, after grabbing dinner at some random stop, we took a walk around the lit-up parking area. That's when we spotted a truck a few spots over. It was dark, hard to make out clearly at first glance. Looked like one of those older rigs, heavy and kind of menacing. There's an unspoken signal among truckers. If the red reading light is on inside the cab, it's a sign for the so-called lot lizards, women who move between trucks offering themselves for a fee. In this truck, the red light was on. The man was sitting in the passenger seat, and even from a distance, I could see his face under the glow. It looked wrong, maybe deformed. And then he smiled, a hollow, lifeless smile. Right after, he yanked the curtain closed with a sharp motion. Even with the curtain drawn, the red light still bled faintly through the window crack, and worse, there was a dark smudge in the small opening. Someone was still watching us. The heat of the night didn't stop the chill crawling down my spine. We rushed back to our own truck, and I had this creeping sense we'd been marked. I turned on the radio to shake it off, but even the chatter on the airwaves felt off that night. Everyone was talking about a body that had been found. Word was, one of the women working the lot had been killed. One of the drivers started telling what he saw, but was quickly shut down. He claimed a cop told him to keep quiet. That only fueled more curiosity. My ex and I couldn't resist. We jumped out of the cab and slipped into the shadows, weaving between the trucks. We needed to see it for ourselves. As we got closer, the air changed, heavier, quieter. And when we finally reached the scene, I understood the weight behind the phrase, "Some things stay with you forever." There was something grotesque about the scene. The woman's body, or what was left of it, was tangled in the trailer. From what we heard when the truck pulled away, she was torn apart. The driver now sat in the back seat of a patrol car, quietly sobbing, breathing heavy with guilt. Even with the door shut, you could hear the raw, choking sobs through the tears. He kept saying he hadn't known, that he hadn't seen anyone tie her to the rig, begging God for forgiveness. Chances are he skipped the walk-around inspection before hitting the road, and that's when the worst happened. I backed away from the scene, doing my best not to look back. As I passed the spot where the dark truck had been earlier, I noticed it was gone. Sometime later, the police came by our truck to take statements. We told them what we'd seen, especially about the strange man in the dark truck that vanished from the lot. I gave them the best description I could recall of the driver. Still, the image kept playing over and over in my mind. It haunted me for days and only started to fade slowly with time. About 3 months later, we were headed to New Orleans. I was excited to see the city, explore new places, and try to shake off what had happened. We parked at a small, run-down truck stop that felt more like a dusty patch of land with a flickering light on an old wooden pole. It was close to the French Quarter, so it was the perfect place to crash before heading into town the next day. Just as we shut off the engine, a familiar voice broke through the radio. It was Maniac. His voice was clear, sharp. He was nearby. I looked around. There were only 2 other trucks. It was almost certain he was in one of them. We had never seen him in person, and this felt like a good opportunity. We called out on the radio, inviting him to dinner. He laughed and declined, said he never left his truck, didn't want to risk being recognized. My ex raised an eyebrow and asked what he meant by recognized. Maniac answered, "Don't worry about it. Just take good care of your girl. It'd be a shame if something bad happened to her like those others." The air went still. His voice felt too close, and there was static between his words. The threat lingered like a slow poison. He kept talking. His voice slipped into something deranged, like he was confessing things he'd never said out loud. He talked about the women he met at truck stops, about how he played with them before it was over. My ex looked at me, pale as a ghost. Maniac's words grew louder, more twisted. He started shouting, calling those women pests, saying he was doing the world a favor by getting rid of them. His voice kept rising, louder, sharper, like it was no longer coming through a speaker, but from inside the cab itself. Then a truck drove past the stop, kicking up dust into the air, and in my ex's face, I saw something I'd never seen before. Pure fear. I was frozen for the first time. I was terrified, too. We were parked near a rest stop when a dark, heavy-looking truck rolled slowly past us. Its front was fitted with a grill guard, and its presence seemed to thicken the air. As it passed the cab, we saw the driver. It was him, the same man from that night at the gas station months earlier when the woman had been found. He turned his head, gave us that same disgusting grin, and calmly lifted his radio mic to his lips. "Take care out there," he said, then drove off down the highway. On the door, the name Maniac was painted in red, gleaming under the harsh, artificial lights. We already knew of at least 7 murders, but who could say how many had happened without anyone ever finding out? We reported the truck and gave the description to the police, but we never learned if he was actually caught. My ex and I stepped away from the road for a while. We didn't go back until the following summer. When we did, everything was different. I kept to myself, avoided small talk, and always carried a blade hidden just in case. If I ever crossed paths with him again, I didn't want to be caught off guard. Years later, life had taken a different shape. I was in college, living in a modest dorm setup inside a converted house. One day, my car broke down and I had to call a tow service to get it to a dealership. I agreed to ride with the driver to the lot since I needed to arrange a rental. It was supposed to be a quick 30-minute trip. The driver talked a lot, jumping between random topics. I stayed polite. He was doing me a favor, and the ride didn't seem like anything to worry about. On the way back, the vibe shifted. He started talking about his ex, about personal stuff, and how badly he'd been treated. I gave short answers, hoping the conversation would die out. That's when I realized I'd made a mistake getting into that truck. Once we got back, I went straight inside the dorm and locked the door, relieved. I thought that was the end of it, but in the days that followed, I started getting texts and calls from an unknown number. The driver had copied my contact info from the form I filled out for the tow request. I began living in fear. He should never have had that kind of access to me. The worst part came when he started showing up, knocking on my dorm door like it was normal. After a week of this, I called the company. I spoke with the owner, explained everything, and he just said maybe he just liked you brushing it off. I made it clear I'd file a restraining order if they didn't take it seriously. Ever since then, anytime someone asks for my personal details for a service, I think back to that week, and I've never stepped into a tow truck again. A few weeks ago, my girlfriend and I were on the final stretch of a long road trip with our dog in the back seat. It had been hours since our last stop, so we decided to pull into a rest area along the highway to stretch our legs and let the dog relieve himself. When we arrived, the place was completely empty, just 3 trucks lined up in a row, all parked still beneath a cloudy sky. My girlfriend headed straight for the restroom, and I stayed outside with the dog. That's when I heard someone yelling. It was one of the truckers. He was in the driver's seat with the window down, calling out to me. I'm not the type to ignore someone asking for help, even if something feels off. I took a few steps in his direction. He was older, big guy, gray hair, wearing dark sunglasses. The sound of his engine made it hard to hear what he was saying, so I shouted back, asking what he needed. He repeated something 3 times, but all I could catch was a frustrated wave. He seemed annoyed, so I walked a little closer, stopping between my car and his truck. Then he said, in a slow, dragging tone, that he'd lost his phone. He wanted help looking for it, I'll admit. The whole thing felt off. We had just pulled in, and less than a minute later, this guy was already asking a total stranger for help. I asked where he lost it. He said it was inside his truck and invited me to come up and search with him. That's when something in me locked up. A deep instinct. I was clear-headed, alert, and something in his tone made me back off. I pretended to make a phone call, told him I couldn't help. He just sat there like he was waiting for me to change my mind. Then he asked again in a strange voice, "You're really not going to help me find my phone?" I felt heat rise in my chest. Adrenaline kicked in. I yelled, "Back off." I didn't have anything to defend myself with, but I wanted to make it clear I wasn't an easy target. I grabbed the dog, got into the car, and pulled out my phone, pretending to call the cops. He started to drive off, but then stopped again just a few yards away, staring. He asked one more time, as if still expecting me to give in. That's when I really shouted, warning him I'd call the police if he didn't leave. He hit the gas and disappeared down the exit ramp. I stood there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. My girlfriend came out of the restroom and asked why I looked so pale. I couldn't explain it clearly. The whole thing felt like a strange dream, but one thing was crystal clear. Stepping into a stranger's cab is never a good idea, and maybe that lost phone wasn't what he was really after. 5 years ago, when I was 21, we took our second long highway trip. The goal was simple: pick up a few leftover things and bring our 2 dogs along. We were already burned out from the road, only stopping for the essentials: food, bathroom breaks, a quick stretch. Rest areas at weird hours had become routine. I honestly can't remember which state this happened in. After so many trips, it all blurs together. But that night, that one, I'll never forget. It was sometime between 3 and 4 in the morning. Only one other vehicle was parked, and the truck lot was practically empty. My husband decided to stop so we could walk the dogs and use the restrooms. I told him I'd run to the bathroom first, and he stayed behind to smoke and watch the dogs. Our car was in the pet area, but to get to the restroom, you had to walk uphill. From where we were parked, you couldn't even see the building. So even though he was tired, he walked part of the way with me, just to be sure. I didn't mind. Having him there brought a certain comfort in that still, quiet loneliness. I went in, did my thing, and we switched places. He handed me the dogs and went toward the bathroom. Despite the hour and the isolation, I felt safe. My 2 dogs are German Shepherd mixes, big, alert, and incredibly protective. As they sniffed around in the grass, I noticed one of the trucks on the far end of the lot started its engine and began to move. At first, I figured the driver was just heading back to the highway. I continued walking the dogs and picked up their waste like I always do. On my way to the trash can, I was suddenly hit by bright headlights. I turned my face instinctively. It was the same truck I'd seen earlier, but now it was parked closer to the car area. The lights were aimed directly at me, almost blinding. I felt annoyed, tossed the bags in the trash, and began walking back. Then the driver started flashing the lights. Once, twice, over and over. I was nearly back at the car, trying to figure out if he was signaling something. Was something wrong with me? The dogs? The car? But all I felt was this rising discomfort. The truck moved again, slowly creeping toward me. The flashing lights came faster, more frantic. My dogs, picking up on my shift in energy, got tense. The bigger one stepped forward, barking hard. By then, I was nearly at the car. The driver stopped, but kept flashing the beams. I don't scare easily, but this felt off, way off. Instead of bolting, I stood still. I stared directly into the lights, held my ground. Finally, he stopped flashing. I thought that was the end of it. I reached into my pocket for the keys. My heart was pounding. I was seconds away from unlocking the car. Suddenly, my dogs stiffened beside me. Their growls were low and steady, bodies tense, as if the air itself had shifted. I followed their gaze toward the truck, and in that instant, I understood. The driver's side door was open. A foot was slowly emerging from the cab. My breath caught in my chest. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. He was actually trying to come closer. That's when my husband showed up, walking from the direction of the restroom without saying a word. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders and flipped the driver. The response was instant. The foot disappeared. The door slammed shut, and the truck slowly backed out of the rest area before vanishing into the darkness. I told my husband about the flashing headlights and the creeping movement of the truck. He explained that, unfortunately, some drivers use those kinds of signals to try and call women over in rest stops, a disgusting, invasive practice. I felt sick. That man probably thought I was alone, judging by how the place was set up. I didn't look like someone open to being approached. I was bundled in thick layers because of the cold, driving a modern car. Still, it didn't seem like he was looking for an invitation. Why else would he step out of the cab after I'd clearly been ignoring him? The conclusion was hard to avoid. Whatever he wanted, it wasn't anything safe. This wasn't just about being harassed. It felt like something much darker could have unfolded. The truth is, that night only ended the way it did because of timing. He was acting like no one was watching. If my husband hadn't shown up at that exact moment, I don't know how far things could have gone. So if any woman is hearing this right now, especially if you travel alone, let me leave this with you. Be careful at rest stops. Not everyone sitting in the dark is just trying to get some sleep. These stories remind us that behind the quiet stillness of highways and rest areas, there can be real danger lurking just out of sight. What starts as a simple stop to stretch your legs can quickly turn into a moment of fear, or worse. That's why it's so important to talk about these experiences, to share them, and to raise awareness, especially for those who often travel alone. If you found this video engaging, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future episodes. And we want to hear from you. Have you ever experienced something strange, scary, or mysterious on the road? Drop a comment below or send your story to desvendandohistorias00001@gmail.com. Your story might be featured in a future video. See you next time.